Welcome to the Nonprofit Report, your update on nonprofit organizations, issues, and leaders, viewable on M. Oppenheim TV and YouTube. I'm your host, Mark Oppenheim, and today we're chatting with the leadership team of Pittsburgh Public Theater, Marya C. Kaminski, Artistic Director, and Shaunda McDill, Managing Director of this renowned organization. Thank you both so much for joining us on your 50th anniversary season. It's just wonderful to have you. So we're going to start with this idea of the 2024-25 season being your 50th anniversary. And I just sort of looked up, and you have this great sort of list of all the performances that you've had throughout every season that you presented. The first season, obviously, your predecessors were not ambitious by staging The Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams' renowned play, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which was a new production at that time, and Twelfth Night by Shakespeare. And now, your 50th anniversary, you have, let me see, Christmas Story, Trouble in Mind, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and Twelfth Night again, right? Indeed. So fabulous. Marya, how do you look at theater writ large and its role in society? Because that is going to inform what you actually do on stage.
It sure does. Thanks for asking, Mark. Since I've been here, I have said, and I don't think it's always the most popular opinion, but I don't really believe in art for art's sake. I believe in art, it's at least the kind of art we do, the public art, where neighbors and strangers sit shoulder to shoulder, that it's here to connect us. And so for Shaunda and I, we have been chasing this vision of what it means to be a true public theater. And that is the lens that we look at the programming, look at our values, look at our operations. That's what we're trying to realize day by day. So what you see in the 50th anniversary season, I am humbled to be a part of a long legacy of really powerhouse artistic directors here. But what I love about that first season is there was a Shakespeare, there was a beloved American classic, and there was a really risky new play. That was, I think, a year before the film came out. So One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest was actually unknown and burnt the house down. People loved it. So I feel like even then they were looking for a great balance of familiar and beloved and a sense of event and risk.
And the themes are so immortal, aren't they, Shaunda? You have this idea of conformity, right? This idea of difference, this idea of who is in the asylum and who's running the asylum, right?
Yes.
So Shaunda, when you're looking at your work,
okay,
do you take this idea? I love what Marya said about, I don't believe in art for art's sake, because what Marya is saying is that if the artists give a fabulous performance but nobody comes, it's not enough, right?
I agree.
And that's a big part of your job, is to make sure that people are coming.
Our team spends a lot of time working on that. What I want to state when we talk about that is it doesn't take away from the beauty, the elegance, the importance of the work if no one shows up, right? But we find meaning at the public, making sure that there is this connection to people and their experience. And that only enhances what is inherent to the art itself, right? I laughed when you talked about the asylum, because I feel like that when I come to work. I'm like, who's running this asylum? I think art imitates life, right? Or one of the others. So I think at the end of the day, all of us are in this industry doing really difficult work to try to make sure that we can get in the seat, shoulder to shoulder, as Marya said, to get at what is most humane about us all, that we can become better people, better citizens, enjoy stories that we are unfamiliar with. Because all of them, even if they're from different perspectives, often have a common denominator of the fact that we've experienced them and we somehow want to be heard about them.
So you're serving a Pittsburgh audience, and that audience segments into young folks and older folks and everybody in between. It segments by people with different backgrounds, different races, different ethnicities, different sensibilities, different political affiliations. How do you ensure that you're speaking to all these different audience cohorts and you're giving them the opportunity to come together and share this sort of common experience? How do you actually, what does the process of that outreach look like?
Well, I will say I'm new here. I just came in February, so I want to hear Marya's response as well over time. So one, I think art does it. I think the things that Marya was programming, we're bringing different people. We see that in the data, right? People will respond to what they want to see. The other thing I will say, though, is we've been very intentional, even in the last year and a half, to welcome other organizations into our space. I think sometimes we put undue pressure on an artistic director to be the sole convener of all these different communities and intergenerational, and maybe they want to do something that is more abstract, more, but the pressure as this leader is to be the sole arbiter of that. I actually think theaters themselves have to begin to think of themselves as third place destinations that are not just bringing people together for the art just in and of itself, if we talk about art for art's sake, but also because they want to produce something, they want to come into the space, they want to utilize it to meet for social activities. So I think part of the way we do it is through the season. Another part of the way we do it is through new initiatives where we bring other arts organizations into our space, or we find ways in which to engage with them through workforce or programming or educational initiatives. And we build that relationship that hopefully translates into people sitting in the seats for the art that they also want to see.
Jump in, Marya. You're selecting plays based on interest from the artists, but you're also thinking, your consumers. Everything can't be A Christmas Story. Okay. Everything can't be Twelfth Night. Everything can't be Trouble in Mind. Everything can't be, right? But you're thinking about who connects, right?
Absolutely. Well, we're in season planning now, of course. We're 25, 26, we're well on our way. And I remember when I was in my first season planning session with one of my mentors and was like, well, what's the theme? What's the common thread? What, are they all set in a kitchen? What is it? And he's like, oh, Marya, it's not about common thread. It's about balance. And that does guide my programming. We want balance. We want comedy, and we want something epic, but we also want to laugh. I have found that in these seasons, if I program too many comedies, it feels like there's not enough gravity in the season. So I think balancing all of that out. You also mentioned these demographics. And one thing that all of these demographics have in common here at the Public Theater in Pittsburgh is that they're Pittsburghers. So one of the things that Shaunda and I have done is sometimes with inviting other organizations into our building, but we have also funneled a lot of our resources into Pittsburgh artists, into extraordinary emerging artists, very well-established mid-career artists. So we have started to make a practice of producing a play written by a Pittsburgh writer about every other year. And last year we got to see From Page to Stage, The Coffin Maker by Mark Clayton Southers. And it was a celebration of the city. It was a Western revenge play, set in the 1800s. Mark has been writing plays here forever. He has his own following, his own fan base, but it was a great celebration for all of us to see that extraordinary talent in our midst. We all think of August Wills when we think of Pittsburgh, but Pittsburgh actually has the capacity to contain many great playwrights. So that we've been doing that work too.
And one of the things that I think is so interesting about theater, particularly live theater, is that you get to experiment with settings and context. You can take a Shakespearean play and set it in feudal Japan. I was just watching one of Kenneth Branagh's renditions there. I think it was As You Like It. You can take a play like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and change the setting, change the actors, change the cultural context in which it unfolds. And all of a sudden, that dialogue has a different meaning. And that interaction with the audience is so important as well, because that energy is hitting the actors and they're responding to that as well. How do you think about the staging element of these classical plays in terms of ensuring that they connect with the lived experience of your audience so that they can identify with the characters?
Thanks for asking. Adaptation is something we talk about a lot. We just did an adaptation of The Hobbit, which we sat around a D&D tabletop gaming concept. And I remember, early on in the season, we were talking with marketing and I was like, well, we got to let them know it's not The Hobbit. It's not Peter Jackson. It's something else. And Shaunda said they should know by now that it's not going to be what they expect, right? Like that we're always thinking of concept and staging to refresh these stories, to give us a new entry point. I do think the very first part of that as an artistic director is the matchmaking. of the director and the lead artistic team, putting these classic beloved stories into the hands of emerging artists with fresh ideas, new perspectives. And I've had the chance to do that quite a bit over the last few years. What comes to mind is our resident director, Justin Emeka, did an astonishing production called Midsummer Night's Dream in Harlem that actually premiered at Harlem Classic Theater of Harlem.
Classic Theater of Harlem.
Yes. Yeah. So he had a production before it came here, but it was just a showstopper for us. And it was an incredibly joyful production through the lens of, in some ways, diaspora Black culture, and really opened up Midsummer Night's Dream for our audience, attracted a bunch of audiences, and ended up being one of those plays that years later people are like, oh, yeah, well, I saw Midsummer's there. So I think that's an amazing tool to both welcome folks who love theater and also welcome new audiences.
It also keeps things interesting, doesn't it? Right. And I want to also talk about that idea of keeping things interesting, because before we started the recording here, we talked about some of your other programs, and I'd like to sort of reprise some of that. I had mentioned that I had actually taught theatrical fencing to actors who were performing Cyrano, and I think it was Hamlet. And those and you actually have a course on theatrical fencing, right, Shaunda? And then you have other courses, other interactions. You have dialogues with playwrights from the stage. Talk a little bit about how you think about the complementarity between programming and performing, and your season, and also engaging the audience in what happens behind the stage, either from the writer's pen or from the production people who are all part of that sort of staged element.
Yeah, well, I want to start with the fact that Marya has brought on a ton of resident artists, or established a core company, which is new for us here this year also, because it enables us to have this resource that's able to feed back into community with these types of classes, right? So you have Jose Perez, he's teaching a combat course, he works with us on intimacy, and it's just great to have him here to be able to teach people these types of aspects that often people don't think about. Intimacy coaches are fairly new, I feel, in the industry. Of course, there always was combat, but it's important for people to know that there are so many skills that go into making a production happen, that happen behind the scenes. We know the importance of a playwright, but do we understand the importance of the dramaturg, of the person who's doing intimacy and combat, of the person who is building the set, of the set designer, the sound engineers, things of that sort. So we have developed a workforce collaboration with the Pittsburgh Film Office called Create PA. We have Artist Center Stage, which is our own program. We have an Evening With series where we're able to talk to some artists and directors. And then, of course, in the previous workforce program that I mentioned, Create PA, which is with the Film Office, we are trying to find ways to train people in communities who feel they have to leave Pittsburgh in order to have a real job in the arts. And we want to say, you don't have to just come here to CMU, Point Park, to all the schools that are here doing a great job teaching, and then leave to go to New York or LA. You can stay here and work at the Public or at any of the other theaters that are here, and we are going to help give you the training. So that's the intention. And we've offered courses, thanks to RK Mellon, already with regard to grips, and we're going to do one with stage management, and we've done some with production, wardrobe, scenic paint is on the list for this year as well. So, that's important. And it's also important because oftentimes arts and cultural workers remove themselves from the conversation about workforce or regional development or community and economic development. And the fact of the matter is we are core. We are vital to downtown. People are coming downtown to see art still, even if they don't want to come down for work. And we are keeping the city alive and thriving. And we have to tell that story more and be able to translate the jobs we provide into why we are important, as well as the artistic side of our story.
And the creative economy it infects the business economy, right? That whole idea of flexible thinking and responsiveness, communication skills. One of the things that I've found in my business is that we've become more isolated. People's communication skills lapse. Marya, could you talk a little bit about how you have assembled? Shaunda just described how you have assembled a company now. Talk a little bit about that transition from how you operated previously and how you are operating now.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been here about 7 years, about 6.5 years. When I came here, I knew that one, Pittsburgh had an amazing creative community, and that we were facing some financial decisions, some financial structuring in the theater. And I watched this work at the Seattle Repertory Theater. Jerry Manning there said, let's put the Seattle back in the Seattle Repertory Theater. His famous phrase when I was one of the kids was, let's give the keys to the kids, and invest in the artists in Seattle. So a lot of what we've done in terms of the programming, the shifts that we've made in the artistic department with resident artists like a resident director, a resident fight director. This year we have resident puppeteers who just collaborated with us in The Hobbit. And we have augmented that with a core company. This is emerging artists who are providing understudies for most of our main stage roles. We also have some equity understudies for some of the larger roles, but they are training once a week. They meet with all of our incoming directors. They're working with Jose. So we're also trying to just skill build and create a stronger pipeline. The pipeline does exist here. There's an amazing ecosystem here, but as one of the bigger theaters in that ecosystem, just trying to channel our resources and our energy to see the artists and the possibility right in front of us. That said, a healthy mix of out-of-town artists, of New York artists, of international artists, it keeps us honest, keeps us challenged. So I do think it's a balance of those two.
So when you're thinking about triangulating between what goes on stage, the idea of making art work, right? This whole idea of how art connects into society and the practical considerations of income. How do you go out and create a community of funders, supporters, audience members around this idea? Not just that you are presenting a performance on Wednesday and the curtain goes up at a certain time, but there is this idea of affinity to the theater as an organization, the willingness of somebody who is very busy and is perhaps working in a manufacturing a company or running a manufacturing company, that they need to invest in theater. How do those conversations take place and how do they unfold?
We just left one. We just had a brunch. And I think I want to say that part of the ways that I think they successfully unfold is when you're not just trying to create an opportunity for a transactional moment, but you're actually connecting with people's stories. You're finding out why they are interested at all in live experiences or live theater. Why for the last 50 years have they come as an usher to the public? That is commitment. You know, these days, sometimes you cannot get people to come to one event, much less repeatedly be a part. And I think when you understand those stories and people's motivation, then you understand why it is that they are doing what they're doing, and you can kind of continue to connect along those lines and introduce new people. But I find most people have some sort of theatrical story. Today, someone was talking about being Tinkerbell in middle school, and they had never kind of made it into the theater, but they always remember that moment where they challenged themselves, they did something exciting, they were in some sort of ensemble. I think, you know, a group of people that were working toward a goal and they accomplished it. So I'm simplifying it, but I think when we approach funders, when we approach anyone, really what it is about is telling the story of the public and truly what the aspiration is. And sometimes we get so bogged down with the reality of what we're facing in the industry that we forget to tell why we are relevant and why people need to understand what's best in this work and how it's going to impact our future, because often they don't think about it till it's gone.
What you're also saying is that we need to listen to somebody's intrinsic motivation and then connect to it, right?
Yes. Yes. Why is this important? And the moment you stop caring about that, you can't be a true public theater. You can't really even be a good theater, in my opinion, right? Shakespeare is Shakespeare because he understood the times, he understood the people, and he made a space for them. And although it's become elitist in many ways in our society, it really was for the people, and that for them to be able to see themselves and their stories and some of the ways in which they were living in that society and have a reflection, even in places they didn't have access to. So I think this is what's best about us, but we forget those moments. And so I hope anytime we're raising money, our development team is going into a foundation, that we're not doing anything but telling the truth of who we are and why that's important, and finding out why that connects to the strategy of that entity. Because some people, we shouldn't be asking for money, but there are many people who understand this and understand the importance of other people's perspectives, and those are the people we want to contribute.
Marya, do you have any comments on this in terms of how you get people engaged?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think when I'm feeling lofty, I like to just think about acknowledging our civic relevance. And Shaunda, I was just moved how you said, like, people don't usually acknowledge that until it's gone. Oh, that great theater that was downtown, that I grew up at. I do like to say that every great city deserves a library where you can go to study, and a city hall where you can go to govern, and a theater where you can go to feel together. That said, when you talk about getting people engaged, like on the one-on-one, I do think it has to be fun. I think there has to be a sense of event.
What a concept, right?
Yeah. So all those other things need to be true, and I think we need to be aligned around that, like, value statement. But we also just really need to connect and have fun in that really honest, authentic way that is about play.
The thing that strikes me about theater, about great theater, is that you've got a couple of different elements here. You can experience danger, but be safe experiencing it. You can experience things that are outrageous to you, but again, you're safe. You're not going to be attacked. You're experiencing it, but a little bit from a distance. And the other thing about fun is that it's everything. It's how you see where you're seated. It's being able to hear everything. It's being able to see everything. It's being able to understand everything. It's the refreshments. It's the entryway. It's the ticketing experience. Shaunda, as you're thinking about that and making it fun, right? Marya is thinking about those aspects that come out of from the stage.
Mm-hmm.
You have to think about those aspects that are, is the temperature right? Is the HVAC working, right? How does somebody who is walking with a cane or can't walk with it, how does somebody who is blind, how are they going to experience? Talk a little bit about how you think about those aspects of fun that you have to deal with on an infrastructure basis.
The three words, we don't have a lot of time, so I won't edit. Like, the three words that come to my mind when I'm listening to you is like fun, but then also like privilege, and also barriers and how to remove them, right? These are the things that are flashing, and risk, right? So all these words are kind of flashing through my mind in terms of how the conversation is developing. And what I think is, first of all, fun is a privilege. Like, you finish your homework, you get to go outside. You do, we want to now live in a way where we're kind of like in this constant euphoria of joy and rest and fun. But the reality is that I've experienced in my 47 years is that you often, you work hard, you play hard, right? You do what you have to do so you can do what you want to do. And so for me, in terms of that, I don't know that I'm always the keeper of fun, although I try to be, because I think something that could be negative in the theater is if you think fun is only artistic and it's not administrative, right? So I think we have to find a way that the entire entity becomes a place of learning and fun and enjoyment. And it's easier when the art is good. Thank God for Marya's programming and her excellent direction and the people that she brings to the table. So in short, to answer your question, I think we have to think about the barriers that people, are facing. We've been talking a lot today in our office about how now every actor is mic'd. It's just a different world of training. Marya, grew up in a field where people were projecting more. It's just a different, maybe those courses are not offered. So if people are consistently saying they can't hear, we can want something to be, but we have to actually address the need or the barrier that's keeping people from enjoying the thing that's
and each of these things comes with a cost, right? So we also have to be willing to ask and get funded, and eliminating barriers don't come cheap, right?
Not cheap. And you also have to be willing to take a risk, because now if you're bringing a blind person in, or if you're bringing someone in who has or you're bringing a Black woman who's never been at the helm of an organization, you have to be willing to say, what don't I know? What am I going to take time, which often in theater you don't feel you have, because you're trying to get through load in, and you're trying to get to the next show, and then you're trying to do it all in a way that keeps costs down and keeps the art in an excellent form. So time gets sacrificed. So when you start engaging new people, learning new things that they need, trying to give them access, all of these things, which everyone has the right, if we talk about it being a public space, has the right to, how do we remove all those barriers, which is risk in our personal relationships, risk in our investments, but we know the facts, which is those investments only end up making an institution better, and we just need more examples of it. So what we want to do is be an example of a place that has made those investments, taken some of those risks, and we're better off for it in a time when many theaters are closing.
Theater without risk isn't theater, right, Marya?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
What is it, I wonder?
So it's kind of baked in. I just want to thank you both for sharing all the work that you've done. Marya C. Kaminski, artistic director, and Shaunda McDill, managing director of Pittsburgh Public Theater. Thank you so much for sharing your work, the work of your people, the work of your actors, the work of your funders, and thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for this space.